And without further ado, I would like to welcome our first speaker, Lee Jones from Worldline. Lee, are you with us? Hi.
Hi, good afternoon, Claire. I can hear you loud and clear.
Good, welcome. I love all this technology and these flying people coming from different parts of the screen. Okay, so Lee, really looking forward to your session. So I'll hand over to you now.
Great, thank you, Claire. And hello, everybody. I hope you're keeping well and safe. My name's Lee Jones. I am the Managing Director GSV for Northern Europe at Worldline. And pretty much every job I've had over the last 25 years has revolved or involved cashless payments. For me, the payment experience is a chance to wow or dismay a customer at what I define as being the moment of truth. It is the most sensitive point in the shopping journey from my perspective. It is where the customer commits to the seller, and the impact on the customer experience can potentially be at its greatest in terms of delivering a bad experience or a great experience. During this short presentation, I will share with you some personal observations and experiences, which I'm sure many of which will resonate with several of you on this session this afternoon. For me, on the agenda, I'm going to talk a little bit about cashless payments and how things have evolved. I'm going to then move on and spend a little bit of time talking about contactless and contactless adoption before looking at how the digital shopping journey lends itself in an increasingly cashless world to a post-pandemic way of delivering personalized, engaging and dynamic experience. Okay, so there's my challenge on technology. I'm going to take a little bit of a look back at some key milestones. And don't worry, I'm not going to go all the way back to 1877 when Edward Bellamy first started talking about the concept of credit cards in his book Backward. But I am going to pick out a few milestones that for me certainly jumped out when I was preparing for this presentation. One of those that really struck me was it's actually nearly 50 years since the first chip cards were introduced. Now, it seems like 50 years is clearly a long time. But for me, what seems to be true is that while things can sometimes take a little bit of time to get started, certainly once things do start to move, acceleration definitely comes to the fore. And if you look at, in the year 2000, when PayPal as a payment method was launched, while it was launched, into the year 2000, it didn't take them months and years to get to 1 million customers. They actually managed to get there within a few weeks. And that just shows that if people can deliver value to a consumer and to a shopper, make people feel comfortable and confident with a new way of doing things, that very quickly adoption, usage, and then benefits are embraced by everybody and are there for all to see. In terms of 2003, this for me particularly as an individual was a key step. And when we saw chip and PIN being introduced into the UK, I actually remember very fondly a number of conversations with many IT directors and CIOs of some of the merchants that we were dealing with who said, Lee, you're trying to sell a solution to fix a problem that really doesn't exist. And probably at the time, they were right in terms of cardholder fraud was generally not a big concern for them. And they felt a little bit aggrieved that they had to invest in new technology to actually try and minimize that. However, if we hadn't have done that, then we certainly wouldn't have been where we are today and find ourselves with the cashless journey really moving forward at pace. As you can see, by 2004, card payments had now overtaken cash. And by the time we got to 2007, contactless cards had started to be introduced. Now with contactless, that's 13 years ago in the UK, and specifically in terms of when contactless cards and technology came to our country. But it's taken a bit of time for it actually to really grab the imagination and for it to become a really dominant payment method. But for me, one of the key triggers that really helped, push us along the right path was the London 2012 Olympics. And inside the M25 area, which is the motorway that wraps itself around London, businesses of all different types, shapes and sizes had to invest to put in place contactless capable terminals. And even at the Olympic Park itself, the only way you could actually pay for anything was actually using a contactless card. So it was really driving adoption. And all these businesses that put in place technology like taxi companies, restaurants, hotels, shops, they then were set up to move forward well into the future. And by the time we got to 2019, we found and saw that contactless transactions were actually equating for 24% of all cashless payments made in the UK. And as you can see, even since then in 2020, and despite COVID obviously seeing a lot of establishments unfortunately have to close during a lockdown period, you can see the percentage split of the amount of transactions that were done on contactless is massive. So nearly 1 in 2 on credit cards and nearly 2 in 3 on debit card transactions. So the direction of travel really is in only one way. And if you look at other mature countries with some of the stats that are on the slide in front of you here, this is not just isolated to the UK, as you can see, and particularly in Spain, 80% of all cashless transactions have been made by contactless. That's a huge number and really shows that the public and shoppers alike are really embracing this type of technology and this way of actually paying for things. For me as well, contactless is great because it's fast, it's quick, it's frictionless, and it allows people to get stuff done, but it's also a key tool in the battle against friction. In terms of friction, when I was preparing for this presentation, I decided to sort of take a step back and look at it. And, a lot of companies invest huge amounts of money and resources in trying to address or alleviate friction. And I started to think, well, why do they do that? What are they hoping to achieve? What happens if they successfully or unsuccessfully manage to achieve a reduction in friction on the customer experience? And the definition of friction, as you can see, is it's the force that makes things difficult for things to move freely when they are touching each other. And when it comes to the shopping experience, and particularly with that piece what I define as the moment of truth, the less interference and the fewer steps, the better for the shopper and the better on the overall experience. In a Salesforce.com report, it was found that 72% of customers who have a positive experience will tell 6 or more people about the good or service they've bought and the overall experience they've had. But on the flip side, 1 in 3 customers will actually abandon a brand if they have just one bad experience, with that increasing to 92% if 2 or 3 bad experiences are delivered. And that is a huge impact on a business if a good or a bad experience is actually delivered to a shopper. But what is also important is where a customer receives a great experience, they will actually pay more for goods or services. And according to a report by Adaby, that can actually rise by up to 13% for general goods and services, and actually rises to as high as 18% for luxury items and luxury goods. So friction has a real part to play in the customer experience, and reducing and managing it is something that should definitely be focused on. When it comes to looking at the experience and looking at friction, one of the things that we recommend people do is that they take a step back and actually immerse themselves in the journey that they currently provide to shoppers, but also look at the moods and emotions that they want people to have as they move forward. Creating that more dynamic, more engaging and safer way of customers being able to pay and buy things, is really, really essential. For me, some of the things that we've seen are, organizations are now looking at how can they deliver services that are brought to the most convenient point for the customer, again, in that way that is safest for them, but also delivers that real sort of smooth journey. One of the areas that we've seen a huge amount of interest in recently is around sort of mobility. And one of the customers we spent a lot of time working with as an organization over the last few years is Apple. What I really like about the Apple experience in their retail stores is that a store staff member is empowered with a mobile piece of technology. They can go and help a customer at the point most convenient for the shopper. They can answer questions. And then as the customer moves through the buying process, they're able to, at the point the customer wants to commit, take payment, again, at the most convenient and arguably most safest point for that shopper. They can then also have the goods brought to where the shopper is stood, which means there's no risk and no need to move from the front of the shop to the back of the shop. There's no need to interact or engage or bump into other people, which may be a concern in the post-pandemic world. And it's a really elegant way of delivering that friction-free, but a really great personalized experience. We've all been there, and the only thing that surprises me about the next stat is that it's not higher, is that, we've all been at a point where we've picked up an item, decided we want to make a purchase and taken one look at a queue and gone, you know what, forget it. And apparently the stat around that is 78% of people have found themselves in that position. As I said, the only thing that really surprises me is it's only 78% who've made a decision to buy, but then been put off because they just simply do not want to stand in a line. Also, for me, the staff play a key part as well in the shopping experience. Staff want to interact with people. They want to help. They want to feel empowered. So as we increasingly see customers coming to us and adopting mobile technology, empowering them, staff get on board straight away. But the staff actually going out and helping customers, it's been seen, will actually help convince and actually secure sales as well, which can lead to real bottom and top line benefits from an organization, while helping keep staff happy and keep delivering that, like I said, that engaging, dynamic way of working and interacting with customers. One of the challenges that many organizations face is how to knit together the different sales channels that they have, particularly from a payment perspective. Many journeys will often start in one channel and finish in another, and getting sales channels to complement and not compete with one another is a challenge that a lot of organizations can face. One of the things that we spend a lot of time working with people on is tokenization. So by tokenizing cardholder data, it's possible to be able to track a cardholder's behavior, the journeys that they go on, which can then allow you to dig into, what are their personal preferences? What are the things that really jump out and grab their attention and ultimately get them to commit? And how and where do they spend their time, effort, and money? This way of tokenizing card data allows organizations to get what I call actionable insight. So insight that you can act on and deliver campaigns around, again, just to create that more personalized way of dealing and approaching a shopper. Tokenization also has other benefits in that it allows cross-channel use cases to be delivered and put in place from, in a very seamless way. It allows, transactions to be monitored. It allows refunds to be processed, irrespective of the different channel that they've been made in, but all by using one central portal. And this can deliver real operational savings and minimize the overhead that's placed on staff to manage, customer experiences and customer interaction when things develop. For me as well, as we move forward, one of the key things is embracing new technology. Technology and payment solutions in particular do and will play a key part as we move forward. We're all very familiar with self-checkout devices. Every time we go into a grocery store, a supermarket chain, convenience store, and other types of establishment, we come across self-checkout devices, and generally most people are very confident and comfortable using them. But a bit further afield in places like China, you can see now where there are concepts such as stores that are 100% self-service. And while in Europe, we're probably a little bit away behind having, shops that are standalone and 100% self-service, although there's the Amazon Go, store concept is coming to Europe and in the UK very soon. We are used to today paying for our fuel, paying for train tickets and collecting them, and paying for parking, again, in a fully self-service way. So perhaps this isn't too far away from us as we look forward. Another area that we're seeing a huge amount of interest in at Worldline is around scan and pay. So this is the ability for shoppers to be able to use their own device as they walk around an establishment, scan goods, and then at the point of payment, make a decision on how they want to check out, whether they want it to be a completely frictionless experience and just do it themselves, or actually have an element of friction, which actually might for some provide an element of reassurance as well. So we're seeing a huge interest in that area. One part for me that really is jumping out, that I'm really keen to see how it develops, is how cashless payments and loyalty start to come together increasingly. One of the things that I know, and I'm sure many of you do who are listening to this presentation, is that you need to have today several apps, several cards when it comes to loyalty. If you have a relationship with many different merchants, this for me is quite a clunky way of navigating through a loyalty experience when simply you just want to redeem or collect points. And then from a payment perspective, just tap and go about your everyday journey. So how organizations start to now move towards perhaps a more of a two-tap way of working. So you present your phone to redeem or collect your points, and then you do a second tap to actually make the payment before completing your transaction. That feels like a much more elegant way of doing things. So I'm interested to see how people like Google and Apple approach this, but how merchants perhaps even collaborate and come together to come up with solutions to this area, because loyalty programs are heavily invested in, and for them to succeed, you have to find an elegant way of making it simple and making their application and their loyalty schemes become a little bit more accessible and fluid for people. From my perspective, I don't know when lockdown measures will ultimately cease, how the world will eventually emerge from things. But what I do know is that things have definitely changed. And I think it's right to accept that this change is probably with us now forever, and things will continue to develop and evolve as we go forward. Technology, as I mentioned, and cashless payments will play a key part in the post-pandemic world. For me, cashless payments is the standout, default, safest way of people paying for things. And looking at the stats I shared earlier and the way contactless has been increasingly embraced, that definitely bears true. I think with the contactless limits increasing, that again will reinforce the value to both merchants and shoppers that there is a better, safer way of paying, perhaps than other means that in the past might have been more natural and more comfortable for people. But also things like security have to be right as well. So with every increase in limits, customers need to be sure that their data, their payments and their money remain safe. And merchants have a part to play in that. When I look back at how contactless was launched in the UK, merchants really, pushed hard on advertising the benefits to shoppers. And again, they have a real part when it comes to encouraging and embracing the new way of providing payment options at the point of sale for customers. I think the way people interact in a store certainly is definitely going to change. I think we're already seeing through the discussions we're having about mobility, serving people at that most convenient and safest point seems to have never been more important. And one of the things I'm really pleased about with a lot of the customers we deal with is their responsible attitude towards COVID. They appreciate that the trust put in them as a brand is something they can never compromise on and they can never take for granted. So while I'm sure it's painful for a lot of organizations to put in place lots of measures, the diligence that we see that people are really applying certainly gives me a lot of reassurance as a shopper and as a general member of the public when I'm out and about, knowing that they've actually really thought through the journey I'm going to go on, and they want to make it as safe and as specific and customized as it possibly can be. So they keep me loyal and keep me coming back time and time again while talking positively about them as a brand. I think channels are definitely coming together. I talked about how journeys can start in one channel and another. We're going to see that increasingly. So making those journeys seamless, opening up different use cases and allowing businesses to become more operationally effective at the back end as well as the front end is important, because you can do a lot of stuff in front of the customer, but if it's a bit of a mess behind the scenes, then any benefits in terms of increased sales, increased profits will quickly be eroded if things are not done seamlessly and efficiently. I've gone through quite a lot there, I think it's fair to say, but I really hope you found that interesting, insightful and helpful. And I'll now pass back to Claire. So thank you for your time this afternoon, and I hope you enjoyed that short presentation.